Hey there, have you ever wondered how an old wooden mailbox could change an entire society? Tonight, we're diving into a strange tale about a mailbox that didn't just hold letters, it sparked bizarre laws that an entire community had to follow. From a foggy colonial street, a quirky tradition began, recording every odd law that defied logic, but somehow found its place in history. If you enjoy surprising stories and want to know how this mailbox turned things upside down, don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe. And feel free to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing where in the world everyone is tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft hum, and get ready for a journey into a world of strange laws, quirky letters, and forgotten mysteries. Hey guys, tonight we're heading back in time, way back, to a foggy colonial outpost where the air smells faintly of salt, ink, and wood smoke. You stand on a crooked cobblestone street lined with flickering oil lamps, and there it is, a battered wooden mailbox nailed slightly askew beside the post office door. It creaks when the wind nudges it, and you probably won't survive this, not from danger, but from sheer bureaucratic boredom. Still, somehow, this humble box is about to change everything. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's my favorite thing to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The mailbox doesn't look important. It's been painted over so many times that the wood beneath feels more rumor than substance. But one morning in 1724, give or take a few calendar corrections, a clerk named Edwin Fennell decides that every letter deserves a witness. He's young, underpaid, and deeply convinced that the world hides its most interesting stories inside official envelopes. When people complain about new colonial decrees, like the one forbidding unlicensed gatherings of geese, he copies their letters for fun, not for politics, just for the odd pleasure of preserving nonsense. You can almost see him there, ink-stained fingers, coffee gone cold, muttering as he transcribes a missive about the governor's hat tax. 1 shilling per brim width, the law says. Edwin underlines it twice and adds a note in the margin. Ridiculous, but enforceable. And just like that, the first unofficial law archive begins, inside a post office barely large enough for a broom. Outside, a cart rattles past carrying crates of oranges, or maybe cannonballs. It's hard to tell in this colony where trade and survival overlap. A boy runs by shouting about a new proclamation. No shouting after sundown. The irony escapes him completely. Mainstream historical fact. In several 18th century colonies, local postmasters were often the only literate officials available, so they doubled as unofficial record keepers. Laws, announcements, and petitions all passed through their hands, usually with coffee stains attached. Without these individuals, historians say, entire decades of small decrees would have vanished. You walk closer to the mailbox and it creaks again, softer this time, almost like a sigh. Inside, letters lie in a jumble, requests, gossip, appeals, and one with a doodle of what looks suspiciously like a dancing pig. You can't help smiling. Bureaucracy has always had its moments of accidental art. Edwin doesn't know it yet, but his habit of copying and filing everything, both the sensible and the absurd, will outlive him by centuries. Over time, his dusty notebooks become the town's favorite entertainment. Every week people drop by just to peek at the book of rules, laughing at decrees like no goats upon rooftops, or citizens must bow when the bell rings twice. Quirky tidbit: there really was a colonial law in 1740s Pennsylvania banning singing loudly while milking cows, on the grounds it startled livestock. The law was mostly ignored, except by Edwin's counterparts, who dutifully copied it into their ledgers. You lean against the doorframe, hearing the soft shuffle of paper within. In a way, this archive feels alive. It doesn't judge, it simply accumulates. Historians still argue whether Edwin meant to preserve history or was simply trying to stay awake through his shift. The debate is charmingly inconclusive. Half the scholars say he foresaw the importance of documentation. The other half insist he just liked eavesdropping on other people's mail. The rain begins, gentle at first, tapping against the shutters like fingers drumming on a desk. You imagine Edwin lighting another candle, sealing his latest copy with wax that smells faintly of pine. He hums a tune, maybe the same one played at the tavern down the road. In your mind, the room stretches, papers piled high, letters fluttering in the draft like sleepy birds. The air tastes of ink and patience. And here's the strange thing. Centuries later, when digital archivists rediscover this collection, they find it oddly well preserved. Not because of any grand effort, but because Edwin stored the pages inside. Empty tea chests, layers of dried leaves absorbing moisture like makeshift desiccants. Preservation by accident once again. You glance back at the wooden mailbox. Its lid quivers under the rain. The carving at its base reads, "For all matters of law and other complaints." Someone has crossed out law and added love. A gust of wind pushes through, rattling the hinges. For a moment, you could swear the mailbox exhales, releasing centuries of whispers in one soft breath. It's almost a sigh of relief, as if it's been waiting for someone to listen again. You stand in that sound, letting it fill the night. Behind you, the sea murmurs against the harbour wall, steady as breathing. Each wave feels like a page turning in a book that never ends. Somewhere deep inside the post office, Edwin's ghost of routine continues, copying, cataloguing, muttering, his legacy forming quietly, line by line. And you realize with a sleepy grin that every archive begins the same way, with someone bored enough to care. The candlelight flickers once more, and you take a step closer to the stack of letters, your fingers brushing against the edge of a century. You pull one envelope out, its wax seal cracked, its paper soft and fragile, and read the first line aloud. To whom it may concern, I object, respectfully, to the ban on singing past midnight. You can't help but laugh. Of course it starts with that. And somewhere in the distance, through the rain and the hum of memory, the mailbox creaks again. Its hinge the same soft note as a yawn. The night folds around you, and the story drifts onward. You wake to the smell of ink and damp wool, the sounds of morning bells rolling in from the harbour. The post office is already alive, sort of. Alive in that slow, half-awake way only bureaucracies can be. You stand beside Edwin's desk, watching him arrange a small stack of letters by weight instead of address because, well, he insists heavier letters feel more urgent. You don't argue. It's too early for logic. Outside, the colony is yawning awake. Sailors shout at gulls, vendors fight with shutters, and someone somewhere is already breaking a law about unlicensed music in public thoroughfares. You can't help smiling. The day feels like it's been written by an amateur playwright with a fondness for chaos. Edwin dips his quill and begins his ritual. Every decree that passes through his hands gets copied, sometimes neatly, sometimes not so much, into a thick ledger labelled Matters of the Crown and Other Complaints. His handwriting is a careful blend of seriousness and fatigue. "Someday," he mutters, "someone will thank me for this." You nod politely, knowing full well he's both absolutely right and completely delusional in the moment. Each page becomes a miniature theatre of colonial life. There's the letter demanding that all bakers weigh their loaves to the ounce, lest unfair puffery deceive the consumer. Another decrees that chimney sweeps must wear brass tokens identifying them as licensed, though no one seems sure where to obtain such tokens. A third announces a ban on public displays of melancholy. You imagine the local constables chasing poets through the streets with warrants titled "Cheer Up" by order of the governor. Mainstream historical fact. In early British colonies, local decrees were often issued not by courts, but by the mail system itself, posted on walls, delivered by carriers, and sometimes even scribbled in margins of unrelated correspondence. The post was law, literally and figuratively. You lean over Edwin's shoulder as he sorts through a small pile of anonymous complaints. Some are absurdly polite. "Dear sir, I regret to inform you that your ban on beards has led to much chin cold." Others are aggressive haikus of anger. One simply reads, Stop taxing candles. We live in the dark already. Edwin grins as he copies that one, adding it to a section he calls the People's Poetry. You realize this man is part clerk, part archivist, part accidental humorist. The law archive he's building isn't just an index, it's a living diary of collective grumbling. Quirky tidbit: among the oldest surviving colonial letters in the Caribbean archives is an unsigned note complaining that goats had learned to open the governor's front gate. The author demanded a goat behavior ordinance. Historians found a matching law 2 months later, complete with goat drawings in the margins, proof that the bureaucracy sometimes listened. You watch Edwin set aside one particularly strange document, a petition titled "Regarding the Correct Width of Sidewalks." He sighs, muttering something about foot politics. Then, in a moment that will ripple through centuries, he stamps it twice instead of once, leaving 2 crimson seals where one should be. The second stamp bleeds slightly, making it look like the law itself is blushing. You might think that's a mistake, but no, this double seal quirk becomes the colony's new obsession. People start duplicating the stamp on purpose, believing it grants laws extra legitimacy. Within a year, double-sealed decrees are the most respected kind, even though no one remembers why. Historians still argue whether this superstition arose from Edwin's tired hands or from his quiet sense of mischief. Either way, it stuck. Even the modern digitized copies preserve that double seal, a sleepy accident turned immortal branding. By midday, the office feels like an orchestra of rustling paper. The air grows thick with candle smoke, dust, and faint traces of honey biscuits from the bakery next door. You catch yourself growing fond of this strange rhythm, the hum of governance as lullaby. A woman enters carrying a small crate labeled "New Directives." She sets it down with a thud. "From the Governor's Council," she says, "and I wouldn't read the top one on an empty stomach." Edwin opens it, skims the first document, and snorts so hard, ink splatters the edge of the page. You lean in. It's a proclamation stating, henceforth, no correspondence may exceed 3 pages, lest the reader lose will to live. You both laugh quietly, the kind of laugh that feels like a secret handshake between centuries. Bureaucracy knows no time zone. He files it carefully anyway. 3 pages exactly, by order of irony. Afternoon light filters through the shutters, turning the floating dust into golden motes. Edwin pauses, looks out the window, and says softly, "Sometimes I think these laws aren't for people. They're for paper." You nod. Paper's easier to control. He smiles at that, and the silence between you hums like the pause between waves. You wander to the back wall where an older ledger sits open. Its ink has faded to the color of weak tea. Scrawled across one page are the words, "For posterity," though she never writes back. Edwin's sense of humor. Again, and yet, There's truth in that line. Posterity rarely does write back, but she reads, centuries later, quietly, through historians and dreamers, scrolling through digital facsimiles. Evening draws near. Edwin gathers the day's letters, stacking them with the precision of someone folding dreams into neat rectangles. He seals each pile with wax, marking the date with careful flourish. As the candle gutters low, he looks up at you. Funny thing, he says. We think laws keep order, but they really just keep us busy. Outside, the rain begins again, rhythmic as a heartbeat. You listen. It sounds almost like the tapping of keys. And somehow, through the centuries of ink and weather, the rhythm of bureaucracy becomes something else entirely, a kind of music, a soft, steady percussion of people trying, in their own clumsy way, to make sense of life together. You close your eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of paper and rain. When you open them, the candle has burned halfway down, and Edwin's already dozing at his desk, head resting on the archive he's unknowingly made immortal. The flame flickers once more, its light bending over the rows of copied decrees, and the story drifts onward through time. The next morning, the office feels heavier, like it's been dreaming all night. You arrive early, but Edwin's already there, sleeves rolled up, elbow deep in a box of small square envelopes. He greets you with a yawn and waves a piece of brittle paper in your direction. "You ever seen one of these before?" he asks. You squint. The letter looks wrong. It's been written in an unfamiliar shorthand, half symbols, half sentences, and sealed with what looks suspiciously like candle wax mixed with sand. "Experimental medium," Edwin says proudly. "They're calling it mail film." Some clerk in another colony thought parchment was too fragile, so he tried coating letters in resin. You touch the edge, and it crackles faintly. The scent is sharp and sweet, like pine tar. "They melt if you store them near a stove," Edwin adds, deadpan. Which is ironic, given the government office requires one in every room. You can't help but chuckle. Bureaucracy and irony, always a team. Mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1700s, colonial administrations experimented with different writing materials to combat humidity. Some letters were coated with beeswax or oil to prevent mildew, though these treatments often destroyed the ink over time. The so-called mail film was one of the more ambitious failures, preserving texture but erasing meaning. Edwin sorts through another pile, this one labeled miscellaneous formats. You catch glimpses of all sorts of chaos, circular pages folded like pie charts, triangular notes meant to save space, even a decree printed on thin linen. The absurd creativity of colonial paperwork never ceases to amaze you. "It's like everyone's trying to invent the future before breakfast," you murmur. "Future?" Edwin grins. "I'm just trying to make it to lunch." You help him stack the fragile items into a box marked "Preserve if possible." It's a losing battle, though. Many are already disintegrating. The humidity turns paper into lace, the ink into watercolor. You imagine all the lost sentences, jokes, arguments, even laws that dissolved into air long before anyone could copy them. Quirky tidbit. In one surviving Caribbean archive, a note was found written entirely in lemon juice, visible only when heated. It read, "If this message appears, please replace the lemon." Scholars assume it was an inside joke about fading ink. You and Edwin find a stack of floppy-looking discs next. Thin, circular things sealed in paper envelopes. Courier reels, he explains, for the telegraph office. They say these can store entire pages of data if spun correctly. You blink. So, pre-digital discs? He nods, scratching his chin. We don't have the reader, of course, it broke. But rumor says one of them holds a song, a tune used to train postal pigeons. Historians still argue whether such reels actually existed or whether Edwin was embellishing out of boredom. But the idea lingers beautifully. Pigeons circling above the colony, guided not by instinct, but by a melody encoded in forgotten metal. As you flip through more envelopes, you start noticing something else, small handwritten notes tucked inside official decrees. Not part of the law, but personal messages. Tell Mother I'm fine. Save the biscuits for Wednesday. Burn this after laughing. These tiny rebellions of warmth feel strangely modern, like the 18th century version of emoji. You picture someone today scrolling through old forums and finding those same sparks of humanity. Proof that even in strict systems, people always find a way to whisper to each other. The rain picks up again outside, beating softly against the window panes. The smell of damp rope and ink fills the room. Edwin leans back, cracking his knuckles. You ever wonder, he muses, how much memory a colony really has? You tilt your head. You mean like officially? I mean spiritually, he says. You copy all these rules, but no one remembers who they were written for. That lands deeper than expected. You look at the piles around you, fragile laws stacked like dominoes, and realize he's right. Each decree once mattered fiercely to someone, then slowly evaporated into paperwork. You run your finger over a warped wooden box labeled unsent. Inside are half-addressed envelopes, some sealed, some empty. I forgot to post these, Edwin says softly. Or maybe they didn't want to. Among them you find one oddity, a letter addressed simply to future postmaster. No sender, no date. You open it carefully. The handwriting is shaky but determined. If you read this, our rules outlived us. Be kind with them. They were never meant to be permanent. You read it twice. It feels like someone whispering across centuries directly to you. Edwin reads over your shoulder and nods solemnly. Put that one in the front, he says. For luck. By midday, the humidity has risen so high that the air tastes like warm paper. The candles sputter. Edwin brings out a peculiar device, a small metal box with a handle which he cranks to generate breeze. Prototype fan, he declares proudly. Prevents ink sweat. You laugh, but it works. The pages flutter like sleepy birds. Later, when you step outside to fetch tea, you catch a glimpse of the post office's notice board. There's a new flyer pinned in the center, a printed schedule listing laws by delivery date. The public can now subscribe to decrees, receiving weekly updates by courier. You grin. So bureaucracy invented newsletters too, you mutter. Edwin joins you, sipping his tea. "We should start charging for premium laws," he jokes. "1 shilling a week, no ads." You roll your eyes, imagining the colonial version of clickbait headlines. "You won't believe what this baker did with salt." The two of you share a quiet laugh as the bells ring again in the distance. Somewhere, another ship arrives, heavy with letters, rules, and new absurdities to copy. The day drifts into evening. The ink on Edwin's fingers looks almost like a map, lines, loops, and smudges forming rivers of memory. He stretches, sighs, and glances toward the growing tower of ledgers. "They say," he murmurs, "paper forgets faster than people think." You tilt your head. Maybe that's its kindness. The two of you stand there a while longer, watching the last light fade. The ocean outside hums softly, as though rehearsing the rhythm of the next law to be written. And beneath the gentle sound of waves and wind, something deeper begins, a whisper from the unposted letters. The forgotten discs, the melting wax, you can almost hear them saying, "Remember," but not too perfectly. By the time you return the next morning, the post office smells like something between burnt sugar and seaweed. The ink heater has malfunctioned again, filling the air with that familiar scent of scorched parchment. Edwin's nowhere to be seen, but the sound of dripping wax echoes from the sorting room. You follow it, careful not to step on loose envelopes scattered like fallen feathers. On the table sits a mountain of parchment rolls, most of them damp, some so brittle they crumble at your breath. Edwin emerges from behind a shelf, holding a dripping quill in his teeth and muttering curses fit for a very polite clerk. "Don't step on those," he warns. "That's next year's legislation." You almost trip over a stack of files labeled "Pending Ink Approval." Apparently, even laws need to wait for supplies. You shake your head. "How do you even approve ink?" you ask, with your heart, Edwin deadpans. "Or a committee, if your heart's unavailable." The absurdity of it all makes you laugh. But underneath the humor lies a truth historians would later verify. Ink was once the most contested commodity in the colonial bureaucracy. The humidity, the insects, and the uneven imports meant every decree depended on a resource that literally bled away. Some towns even created ink steward positions, officials tasked with rationing pigment and recording each drop. You pick up one of the old jars, a squat glass thing half filled with black syrup. It's thick as honey, shimmering faintly. When you unseal it, the scent hits you like history itself. Smoke, iron, and salt. "Feels alive," you whisper. "Everything here's alive," Edwin replies, waving a quill at the buzzing flies. "Especially the bureaucracy," you grin. "Does it ever die?" "Never," he says. "It just reincarnates as paperwork." Mainstream historical fact. In several British and Spanish colonies, government clerks recycled parchments by scraping off old decrees and rewriting over them, producing palimpsests. Modern restorers use infrared light to uncover the erased text beneath, sometimes revealing completely contradictory orders written weeks apart. Historians still argue whether these overwrites were intentional obfuscation or just desperate reuse. You imagine a future scholar scanning one of these sheets, uncovering ghost laws about livestock etiquette beneath tax codes. The idea feels strangely poetic, each rule carrying another inside it, like a bureaucratic matryoshka doll. On the desk, Edwin's been testing different papers. Some soak up ink too fast, others rejected entirely. "We once had parchment that screamed," he says casually. You blink. "Excuse me?" It shrieked when you wrote on it. Something about the resin reacting to humidity scared the living daylights out of the messenger. He grins. "We burned that batch, of course. You can't tell if he's joking, but you suspect not." The post office has a way of making even tall tales sound reasonable. You take a seat beside him, flipping through a ledger titled Revised Acts of Domestic Peculiarities. Inside you find notes about fines for misusing candles, borrowing spoons without permission, and, most curiously, keeping a goat within 6 feet of a bakery oven. "I don't want to know how that law started," you mutter. Edwin raises an eyebrow. "You say that, but now you do." He tells you the story anyway. Apparently, one night a local baker's goat wandered inside the kitchen and fell asleep beside the rising bread. By dawn, the animal's warmth had sped up fermentation, producing the fluffiest loaf anyone had ever seen. Instead of praise, the council panicked, deciding such unnatural softness was a sign of witchcraft. Thus, a law was passed: no goats within oven proximity. Quirky tidbit: there's a verified historical parallel. In 17th century France, a decree banned bakers from keeping cats near dough because the animal's body heat affected yeast growth. You can't stop laughing. So bread witchcraft was a thing. "Oh yes," Edwin says, smirking. "Some people got famous for it." He goes quiet for a moment, dipping his quill into the jar again. The ink makes a faint popping sound, like bubbles of time surfacing. You ever notice how the strangest rules survive longest? He muses. You think about it. Maybe because they're funny. People remember humor more than order. He nods slowly. Maybe that's how memory protects itself. Outside, the sound of the sea blends with the rhythm of quills scratching parchment. The whole building feels alive, breathing, murmuring, waiting. Every stroke of ink feels like a heartbeat. You glance toward the open window and spot something strange. A pigeon perched on the sill, staring straight at you. Its leg bears a small tag. Edwin notices too. "Ah," he says, "that's not a messenger. That's the auditor." You raise an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "She's here to make sure we aren't too creative with the laws." The pigeon coos softly, as if agreeing. Moments later, a gust of wind blows through the room, scattering loose pages across the floor. You and Edwin dive to catch them, an oddly graceful dance of panic and paper. When you finally gather the mess, one sheet catches your attention, an unsigned decree written in faded ink. You squint at the title, Temporary Adjustment to the Definition of Tomorrow. You blink. "Please tell me this isn't real." "Oh, it's real," Edwin says, chuckling. "That one's my favorite. During a storm delay, the governor officially extended today by 8 hours so deadlines wouldn't lapse." You grin. The day bureaucracy conquered time. Historians still argue whether that decree ever took legal effect. Some records show it was repealed instantly. Others claim the colony lived 8 hours longer that week. You can't help smiling as you imagine it, a town suspended between days, living inside an administrative loophole. There's something soothing about it, like the world paused just long enough to catch its breath. The lamps flicker. Edwin caps his inkwell and leans back, eyes heavy. "You know," he murmurs, "I think half our archive is mistakes pretending to be rules." You nod. "And the other half?" "Dreams pretending to be paperwork." You sit there quietly, letting the sound of dripping wax and distant surf fill the silence. The parchment glows amber under the candlelight. Outside, a single pigeon coos again, perhaps approving, perhaps filing a report. In the dimness, you realize something profound. This entire law archive, with its miswritten dates and goat regulations, isn't just bureaucracy, it's storytelling. Every smudge of ink, every misspelled clause, is a glimpse of people trying to understand their world, one scribble at a time. You smile faintly, jotting a note to yourself in the margin. The laws were never about control, they were about remembering. And as the candles burn lower, that thought lingers, gentle and drowsy, curling in your mind like smoke. By now, the post office has developed its own rhythm, a sleepy heartbeat of footsteps, wax and whispering ink. You've grown used to it, the way the walls seem to listen when you talk, the way the wooden desk hums faintly under your elbows. The only thing that changes is what arrives through the slot in the front door. Tonight, something different slides through. A letter thicker than usual, sealed with a splash of blue wax and tied in string. Edwin doesn't even look up when it lands. "You'll want to read that one aloud," he says, his tone conspiratorial. You untie it carefully. The parchment inside is soft, hand-pressed, and smells faintly of rosewater. Written in delicate copperplate script, the heading reads, "The Law of Lullabies." You blink. This has to be a joke. Not a joke, Edwin says, finally glancing over. A melody. The colony once had a rule that every tavern had to close the night with the same song. You raise an eyebrow. Enforced by whom? He smirks. Who else? The postmaster. You can't help but laugh, but the deeper you read, the more real it sounds. The letter details a small incident in which a local innkeeper refused to join the nightly sing-along, claiming the tune gave him nightmares. The council fined him 2 shillings for interfering with communal morale. Mainstream historical fact. In 18th century colonies, public houses were often required to maintain curfews and abide by peaceful closing ordinances, some of which included playing designated tunes to mark the end of the night. The idea was to regulate noise but also to reinforce shared identity. Edwin taps the desk. And that's how the lullaby law began. Every night at 9, same song. Over time, people started humming it while they wrote letters. He pauses, eyes glinting in the candlelight. Some say that melody seeped into the ink. You chuckle, but deep down you kind of want to believe it. You roll the parchment back up and close your eyes for a second, half expecting to hear faint humming from the papers around you. And then you do. A soft note, almost like a breath over glass, vibrates from one of the older ledgers. You glance at Edwin, who's pretending not to notice. "Old paper hums," he says. "Part of the charm." Quirky tidbit. In modern acoustic studies of antique, archives aged paper sometimes produces faint resonance under certain humidity levels. The fibers literally vibrate. Archivists call it ghost tone. Of course, Edwin has no idea about modern science, but he calls it the archive's bedtime song. You lean closer. "Do you think it's real?" He shrugs. "I think reality's too proud to admit how weird it is." Outside, the wind picks up, carrying the distant rhythm of the sea, or maybe of someone whistling. You can't tell. But something about it feels familiar, like you've heard the tune before in another time, another place. Edwin rummages through a box and pulls out a tattered notebook labeled Musical Infractions. "You'll like this one," he says. "It's the record of every person fined for singing off-key. You laugh so hard you nearly knock over an inkwell." "They fined people for that?" "Oh yes," he replies, flipping through pages filled with names, dates, and brief offences. Mrs. Beaton, C major discrepancy. Mr. Rowe, repeated failure to maintain tempo. Goat choir, excessive enthusiasm. Historians still argue whether the so-called goat choir actually existed or if it was a metaphor for the local militia's marching band, known for its bleating horns. Either way, the image endures. A cluster of animals belting out lullabies to meet curfew laws. As you continue reading, you notice a peculiar footnote scrawled in smaller handwriting. "When the night grows too still, hum the tavern song to keep the spirits calm." "Spirits," you murmur. "They mean ghosts?" "Probably boredom," Edwin says, but his tone betrays amusement. Still, they swore the law helped prevent hauntings. There's something strangely comforting about that, as if bureaucracy itself had learned to soothe its own loneliness. You start to imagine the colony at dusk, taverns glowing like fireflies, windows flickering, everyone singing the same simple tune before blowing out their candles. Somewhere, a postmaster listens from his porch, counting the harmonies like stars. You trace a finger down the parchment. The lyrics are written there, short, repetitive, oddly hypnotic. You hum the first line under your breath. It feels natural, almost too natural, like remembering something you never learned. Edwin chuckles. "Careful, that's how it starts." "How what starts?" "The cross-media curse," he says, grinning. "Every few decades, someone reuses the melody in something new, a game, a stage show, an advertisement, and people start talking about coincidences." Your eyes widen. "So it survived into the digital age?" He nods. "Historians call it the lullaby game connection. You'll see. Mainstream historical fact, modern." A small 1990s indie computer game included a background track eerily similar to an 18th century maritime lullaby. The resemblance sparked internet theories that the composer had stumbled on a lost colonial tune. No definitive proof ever emerged, though machine analysis confirmed near-identical phrasing. You grin. So somewhere, some gamer was humming colonial bedtime music without realizing it. Exactly, Edwin says, pleased. History's favorite trick, repetition disguised as coincidence. You can't help but smile at that. The archive feels different now, less like a storage room, more like a sleeping organism humming to itself. Every paper seems to breathe, every law carries a rhythm. You imagine a future archaeologist listening to your own voice on an old recording, marveling at how sound could travel through centuries like a letter through time. You jot a small note. In the margin of the lullaby lore, memory sings best when it forgets half the words. Edwin looks over your shoulder and nods approvingly. That'll make a good lore someday. The lamps sputter. The faint hum from the ledgers grows quieter, settling into something like a sigh. The room feels wrapped in a warmth that isn't heat. More like presence, the sense that something unseen approves of your work. You sit there a while longer, letting the faint echo of the lullaby fade into the night air. The words, the melody, the laws themselves, all blend into a single, steady rhythm. And somewhere in the dark, perhaps beyond paper and time, the colony keeps singing. By the following week, the entire town seems to have fallen under the spell of its own rules. You can feel it in the rhythm of the streets, the way people pause before speaking, as though checking for footnotes. The mailbox outside the post office now overflows daily, stuffed with scrolls, decrees, complaints, and occasionally half-eaten biscuits. Inside, the atmosphere has changed. It's quieter, softer, like a monastery for paper. The lullaby lore still echoes faintly in your head, but now you've become obsessed with another curiosity, the handwritten posters nailed around town titled Community Conduct for the Postal Archive. Ah, yes, Edwin says, pouring lukewarm tea into 2 cracked mugs. Our glorious rulebook for rule-keeping. You unfold one. The list begins. Be polite when arguing about punctuation. Never lick the government seals. If you find a law that contradicts your life, adjust your life. You can't help it. You laugh so hard you spill tea on your sleeve. Mainstream historical fact. Early bureaucracies in colonial settlements relied heavily on social etiquette rather than strict enforcement. Courtesy ordinances were genuine policy tools. Citizens were expected to behave morally because decorum was cheaper than policing. These are adorable, you say, dabbing your sleeve. Did anyone actually enforce them? Oh, constantly, Edwin replies. The moderators. You pause. Moderators? He gestures toward the back room, where 3 elderly clerks sit at a long table under flickering lanterns, moving piles of parchment like chess pieces. They don't look up. They don't speak. But every so often one stamps a page with a red mark shaped like a feather. That's approval, Edwin whispers. If you get stamped with a teapot, that means you're being silly. If you get stamped with a boot, that means exile. Exile from what? He shrugs. Conversation, mostly. You grin. So this was the first comment section. Exactly, he says. Except slower, and with more ink poisoning. Quirky tidbit. Some historical archives contain actual behavior logs, where scribes graded each other's penmanship, tone, and manners. One, the 1729 entry, reads simply, Jeremiah's handwriting still smells smug. You and Edwin walk over to watch the moderators at work. One elderly woman squints at a decree about public basket storage. After a long silence, she sighs and stamps it with a tiny illustration of a spoon. Moderately absurd, Edwin whispers reverently. The whole system fascinates you, a blend of bureaucracy and playground. There's something almost endearing about it. Each law must not only be correct, but pleasantly phrased. Arguments, too, are written with a level of politeness that borders on poetic. You pick up a file titled Petition to Reconsider the Goat Proximity Ruling. The first line reads, Dearest councillors, we write with the warmest regard and minimal frustration to note that goats, being naturally affectionate, may require certain liberties of movement. You smile. They wrote like this while angry. Edwin chuckles. Oh, that's nothing. Wait till you see the rebuttal. He flips to the next page. Esteemed petitioners, we thank you for your passionate hooved advocacy. However, for public safety and olfactory comfort, your proposal is denied. You burst out laughing. Bureaucracy, it seems, once had a sense of humor. Historians still argue whether this civility was genuine or performative, whether colonial politeness masked tension or merely decorated it. But as you watch the moderators stamp away, you suspect it was a bit of both. The feather-stamped decrees are stacked neatly into a cabinet labelled Approved Harmony. The teapot ones go into Pending Sincerity. The boots. Well, you notice that drawer is locked. What's in there? You ask. Edwin lowers his voice. Banned words. Concepts too spicy for the archive. You blink. Like what? He smirks. Sarcasm, skepticism. And apparently the phrase ink apocalypse caused an incident once. Your curiosity burns brighter than the lanterns. Incident? He nods solemnly. Someone used it during a supply shortage. Half the clerks fainted. You stifle a laugh. Was it really that bad? Oh, it was chaos, Edwin says. People were stealing soot from chimneys, crushing berries, even mixing squid ink into their pens. For weeks the laws looked like they'd been written underwater. You picture it. Dripping black scrolls, desperate writers hunched over pots of improvised pigment. So the first creative crisis, you say softly. Exactly. Every generation has one. The moderators murmur approval in the background, the sound blending with the ticking of the pendulum clock. The rhythm is strangely hypnotic. Tick, stamp, sigh, repeat. As the night stretches on, you and Edwin sit at your desks reviewing old conduct files. You find one note written in a child's handwriting. Please don't yell at the ink. It can hear you. You smile. You think kids worked here too? Oh, sure, he says. Clerks' apprentices. They delivered papers, fetched tea, corrected spelling. Half of them grew up thinking adulthood meant filing something forever. You chuckle. Sounds familiar, Edwin grins. You're not wrong. We all work for the same invisible editor in the end. Outside, a bell rings. Not for curfew, but for courtesy hour. It's the colony's most peculiar law. Every night at 10, citizens are required to compliment one neighbor before sleep. A relic of some long-gone governor's optimism. Does anyone still do it? You ask. Some, Edwin says, rubbing his eyes, usually to themselves. You watch through the window as an elderly man across the street leans out, shouting softly, "Nice curtains!" before shutting his shutters for the night. The air feels gentler after that. The archive seems to sigh with relief, as though the compliment applied to it too. You rest your chin on your hands, listening to the creak of the building and the distant sea. Somewhere, a moderator sneezes. Another stamps a paper in response. You glance at Edwin, who's dozing in his chair, pen still in hand. A drop of ink falls from his quill onto a parchment, leaving a perfect dot beside a line that reads, "Let courtesy be our first law and our last." You smile, whispering softly to the quiet room. Approved harmony. The candle flickers low, spreading a honeyed glow across the floor. The ink dries, the stamps cool, and in that stillness the rules of the archive, gentle, absurd, kind, breathe for another night. By morning the air outside smells faintly of rain and old ink. You step out of the post office with a stretch, boots squishing in puddles left by last night's drizzle. The town is awake again, humming with quiet purpose. But something feels different. An undercurrent of mischief, a kind of communal grin. You notice clusters of people gathered around the market square, murmuring, gesturing toward the notice board. Someone has pinned a new parchment there, written in suspiciously elegant script. It reads, "To whom it may concern," as the archive hides a secret. A map, drawn by invisible hands, lies beneath the ink of Law 72. Follow the smudges. Find the truth. You blink. A map? Edwin, who has followed you out with 2 steaming mugs, groans. "Oh, not this again." "Again?" you ask, accepting a mug. He sighs. Every few years, someone starts the cartographic conspiracy rumor. Claims one of the laws secretly charts a buried colony vault or treasure, or, depending on who you ask, a bakery that sells eternal pastries. You raise an eyebrow. "You're telling me the laws might contain secret coordinates?" He shrugs. Historians still argue whether it began as satire or wishful thinking, but it always begins with Law 72, the regulation of post office umbrellas. You nearly choke on your tea. Umbrellas? Specifically, their sharing protocols during coastal drizzle, he says with mock solemnity. Apparently, if you layer the paragraph spacing of Law 72 over a map of the colony, it forms something, a crab, or maybe a triangle. Depends on your imagination and your sleep deprivation. Quirky tidbit. In the early days of online forums, similar map conspiracies flourished. Users swore that specific pixel patterns in outdated logos pointed to secret websites. One famous myth claimed the Microsoft Paint toolbar hid the shape of Atlantis. Still, curiosity gnaws at you. So what if there is a pattern? Edwin chuckles. Then the secret is boredom, but you're not convinced. You return to the archive. the doorbell jingling softly behind you, and head straight for the section labeled Weather-Related Edicts. Law 72 sits near the top, smelling faintly of mildew and ink dust. The parchment is thick, its edges rippled from years of humidity. You spread it on the table, tracing the margins with your fingertips. And yes, there are smudges. Little dots and ink blots that seem too symmetrical to be random. You squint. Is it a shape? Don't, Edwin warns. That's how it starts. First it's a shape, then you're up till 3 a.m. connecting ink dots and whispering about cosmic umbrellas. You grin. I'm already halfway there. The smudges do look deliberate, like faint footprints crossing the parchment. You grab a pencil and begin marking them one by one, connecting them lightly. Slowly, a vague outline emerges, a spiral. Your breath catches. Look, Edwin leans over, eyes rolling but lips twitching. Congratulations, you've discovered the world's first bureaucratic snail. You laugh, though a chill sneaks up your spine. Because the pattern doesn't stop, it continues faintly onto the next page, a completely unrelated law titled Proper Candlelight for Midnight Reading. You follow it page by page. The spiral expands, you know, Edwin says softly. The last person who claimed to solve that pattern disappeared for a week. Came back insisting the archive was talking to them. You glance up. Seriously? He nods. They said every law was written by one hand, a single, invisible scribe. That all we ever did was copy the same whisper. You can't help but smile. Creepy, but poetic. Oh, it gets better, he continues. According to the legend, the whisper came from a mailbox spirit, a polite ghost who enforced good manners through bureaucracy. You laugh out loud. A spectral moderator. Exactly, he says. The story claims it appears whenever people stop saying please. The two of you stare at the parchment, and for a moment the air feels different, thicker, as though the archive itself is listening. Mainstream historical fact. Many colonial towns had folklore about document spirits or ink saints believed to protect libraries from theft or fire. These myths often doubled as moral tales to encourage literacy and respect for record keeping. You tap the spiral again. Maybe they were onto something. Look, it keeps looping around the same phrase. Preserve, but never perfect. Edwin leans closer, brow furrowed. That's odd, it repeats like a mantra, you murmur. Preserve, but never perfect. Preserve, but never perfect. You sit back, grinning. It's like the archive's motto, he nods slowly. Maybe the ghost was just a tired clerk reminding us to stop over-editing. Or maybe, you say, it's a clue. The sound of distant thunder rolls over the bay. The lantern flickers. You feel a pulse of excitement, irrational, deliciously silly. You realize this is basically the first internet conspiracy, right? Hidden patterns, anonymous authors, map theories. Don't forget the unverified source, Edwin adds, and the self-appointed investigators. Which makes you, he says, pointing his quill at you, the 18th century version of a Reddit thread. You laugh, unable to deny it. The parallel is too perfect. The rest of the day passes in a strange rhythm. Visitors drift in, murmuring about the map, sketching their own interpretations. Someone claims the spiral matches the layout of the town. Another insists it mirrors the pattern of the tides. One young woman even brings a brass compass and declares the mailbox is the center of all coordinates. Edwin rolls his eyes, muttering, and so begins the age of theoretical geography. Historians still argue whether such episodes were the beginnings of citizen science or collective daydreaming. Some see them as primitive data analysis. Others call them social coping mechanisms. Either way, it's oddly comforting to realize the human brain has always seen dragons in the margins. By nightfall, the archive buzzes with quiet speculation. Someone lights extra candles. The smell of wax mingles with wet paper and anticipation. You trace the spiral one last time before blowing out your candle, whispering, half-joking, preserve but never perfect. For just an instant, you swear the ink glows faintly. A shimmer, then stillness. You shake your head and laugh softly to yourself. Great, now I'm seeing things. Next, I'll start complimenting my paperwork. From the back room, Edwin's sleepy voice calls out, "Already a law for that? Article 88. Speak kindly to your forms." You grin into the darkness, whispering, "Good night." Law 72, and somewhere deep in the stacks, a paper rustles back. The next morning arrives like a yawn. The mist hangs low over the cobblestones, blurring the edges of the post office sign, as if the world itself is still half asleep. You stretch, rub your eyes, and push open the creaky door to the archive. It smells faintly of candle soot and last night's theories. Edwin is already there, sipping his usual bitter brew, looking both exhausted and faintly amused. "You should have seen it," he says. "Half the town was outside arguing about whether the mailbox is a portal." "A portal to where?" you ask, half hoping for something dramatic. He shrugs. "Mostly to gossip. You can't help but laugh." "So the law archive is trending." "Exactly," he says. "And you, my friend, are its unwilling influencer." You grin, rubbing your temples. At least they're talking about history. By mid-morning, people wander in and out of the post office like it's a cafe. The archivist's table becomes an impromptu stage. There's Martha, the baker, who insists her grandfather's biscuits once appeared in the laws as regulated breakfast bread. There's old Thaddeus, who swears he saw the mailbox hum during storms. And then there's Clara, the colony's unofficial storyteller, whose laughter can fill the entire square. She taps the stack of parchment with a mischievous smile. "You know what this is, don't you?" You blink. "A bureaucratic nightmare?" "It's entertainment," she says. "These laws, half of them were written because people were bored." You lean on the counter. "You mean like performance art?" She winks. "Exactly. A kind of social theatre." Historians still argue whether certain absurd colonial laws, like no singing to livestock after sunset, were serious or satire. Some were passed just to make neighboring colonies jealous of our creativity. Quirky tidbit. One British colonial record from the 1790s includes a law requiring men to wear powdered wigs during rain to uphold dignity in all climates. The reason? A prankster clerk inserted it into the minutes to see if anyone noticed. The same spirit seems alive here. Because as the day unfolds, townsfolk gather around the mailbox to read aloud the law of pig hats, dramatizing it with wooden snouts and laughter. Someone brings a drum. Children wave paper scrolls like flags. The air hums with gentle anarchy. It's chaos, but the charming kind. You watch from the steps, smiling. There's something beautiful about seeing order turned into celebration. The very laws meant to control life are now fueling community theatre. Maybe the real archive was the friends we made along the way. Edwin mutters beside you, deadpan. You snort. Careful, that's dangerously inspirational, he shrugs. Sue me. Oh wait, probably a law for that too. The performance reaches its climax when Clara, standing atop a barrel, declares, "In honor of our ancestors, I hereby proclaim all citizens may nap during work hours if the sun feels nice." The crowd erupts. Someone shouts, "Make it official." And just like that, she scribbles the decree onto a scrap of parchment and slides it into the mailbox slot. The crowd cheers. You glance at Edwin. "You think we should archive that?" He shrugs again. "Why not? Future historians need something to laugh about." As dusk rolls in, the festivities mellow. People drift home, still chuckling, still quoting mock laws. The post office returns to its quiet hum. The mailbox, once just a wooden box, now feels like a town diary, a confessional of collective whimsy. You sit down by the window, watching lanterns glow across the street. A cool breeze sneaks in, carrying the faint scent of baked apples and ink. You pull a blanket tighter and let your thoughts wander. There's something timeless about this kind of playfulness. Every generation, you think, finds a way to rebel softly, through humor, through gentle mischief, through turning rules into stories. Historians still argue whether these moments of communal silliness weaken authority or keep it human. You suspect the answer is both. Laughter is a kind of pressure valve for civilization. You jot a note in your own journal. The archive is alive not because of law, but because of laughter. Edwin peers over your shoulder. Philosophical tonight, aren't we? Maybe it's the cider, you reply. Or maybe I'm realizing bureaucracy is just long-form comedy, he chuckles. Tell that to the tax office, you grin. I might. As the night deepens, the post office grows silent again. You hear the soft shuffle of papers settling, the gentle tick of the clock, the rhythmic squeak of a mouse somewhere in the walls. It's oddly comforting. You rise to blow out the candles one by one. When you reach the mailbox, you pause. There's something new inside, a letter. You pull it out. The paper is thick, its edges uneven. On the front, in an elegant, looping hand, it says simply, "To the keeper of laughter, preserve but never perfect." Your pulse quickens, you flip it over. No sender's name, no seal. Just that faint scent again, wax, ink, and something sweet like cinnamon. Edwin looks up from his ledger. What's that? Fan mail from the afterlife, maybe. You open it carefully. Inside is a single, cryptic sketch, a tiny drawing of the mailbox with a swirl above it, just like the spiral from Law 72. Beneath it, a line of text. Chaos keeps the record breathing. You read it aloud. Edwin leans back, whistling softly. Now that sounds like our motto. You smile, fold the letter, and tuck it back inside the box. Maybe it's the archive's way of saying goodnight. He nods. And we should listen. The two of you stand there for a moment, letting the stillness settle, the flicker of the final candle painting soft gold on the old wooden beams. Outside, rain begins to fall again, steady, rhythmic, patient. You take a deep breath, close the ledger and whisper, "Good-night, Mailbox." Somewhere in the corner, a page flutters as if answering. The storm lingers through dawn. Rain trickles through the gutters, drumming a lazy rhythm on the roof of the post office. You wake to the sound of it, soft and steady, like the world whispering a lullaby. The floorboards creak as you wander toward the archive table, and the faint scent of damp parchment fills the air. Edwin is already awake, his hair sticking up like a startled hedgehog. He's sorting through a pile of letters, muttering to himself. "Morning," you say, voice raspy. He grunts. "Morning." The post came in early. New batch from the Western settlements. You rub your eyes. "Anything interesting?" He raises an eyebrow. "Define interesting. Half of it's tax arguments. The other half's love letters written in legal code." You laugh. "Romance through bureaucracy. Bold." He holds up one letter with mock drama. "Dearest recipient, pursuant to Regulation 19B, subsection 4, I hereby declare undying affection." You snort coffee through your nose. Someone's definitely preserving that one for the ages. As the laughter fades, you notice a smaller envelope tucked beneath the stack. Its seal is stamped with an unfamiliar symbol, 3 concentric circles with tiny dots between them. "What's that?" you ask. Edwin squints. "No idea. Came with the lot, addressed to the keeper of the index. That's technically you." You take it gingerly. The paper feels different, smoother, heavier. Inside is a small card filled with tiny doodles, spirals, birds, and little hats perched on top of letters. Beneath them, a note written in near microscopic handwriting. Indexers must write in code, for truth fears simplicity. You trace the lines with your thumb. The doodles seem oddly familiar, like something from the margins of the archive itself. Edwin peers over your shoulder. Looks like someone's practicing calligraphy while drunk. Or hiding something, you murmur. "You remember the stories about the secret code?" He groans. "You mean the one about the clerk who could hide full sentences inside decorative flourishes?" Yes, the indexer's code. Mainstream historical fact. Many early archivists and scribes used visual codes to tag sensitive records. Some used dots or curls in the margins to indicate a document's importance or danger. In 17th century France, certain archivists hid forbidden phrases inside elaborate letter loops to avoid censorship. You tilt the card closer to the candlelight. Sure enough, between 2 doodled spirals, faint letters peek through. "Check the margins of Law 9. Edwin groans again. "Here we go." You hurry to the back of the archive. pull out the thick folder marked Law 9. On the acceptable hours of candlelight. The parchment is old, the ink faded brown. You scan the edges carefully, and there, it's tiny, almost invisible, a series of little dashes running along the right-hand border. You whisper, "This is it." Edwin leans over your shoulder. "You're telling me someone hid Morse code in candle law?" You grin. "Exactly." The pattern is uneven, playful. You start translating aloud, marking each dot and dash. Slowly, the message emerges. Ink hides what fire reveals. You both stare at it. Edwin breaks the silence first. "That's either profound or a warning that we're about to burn something." You chuckle nervously. "Let's go with profound." Still, your curiosity wins. You light a fresh candle and hold it close to the parchment. The heat makes the surface ripple slightly, and then faintly new lines appear. Invisible ink, thin, looping letters written between the original text. Edwin whistles low. "Well, I'll be damned." You lean closer, heart racing. The hidden writing reads, "If the law is memory, then the indexer is its dream." You exhale softly. "It's poetry," he nods. "Or delirium, but beautiful delirium." You trace the words again. The ink shimmers faintly before fading back into the parchment. "Who do you think wrote it?" "Maybe that same anonymous clerk," Edwin says. Historians still argue whether the indexer's code was real or just legend. Some think it was invented by later scholars desperate for mystery. You smirk. "And yet here it is." He shrugs. "Could just be a prank. Archivists get bored too, you know." You grin. Boredom creates history. Outside, thunder rolls again, softer now, like a drumbeat fading into the distance. The town is quiet, lulled by rain and routine. You glance toward the mailbox, its wooden lid glistening with droplets. "Do you think the mailbox knows?" you ask suddenly. "Knows what?" "That its contents change the colony." Edwin tilts his head. "Maybe, or maybe it's just happy to be fed every day." You smile. Spoken like a true bureaucrat. As the storm tapers off, you sit by the window and start flipping through the index book. Each law listed, each with its tidy title and dull description. But now you see them differently. Each one might hide whispers in its margins, symbols left by invisible hands. You imagine the secret clerks who doodled between sentences centuries ago, exhausted, overworked, probably laughing to themselves as they tucked little mysteries into the paperwork. The thought comforts you. Historians still argue whether archivists are artists or merely servants of memory. You suspect they're both. Scribes painting with ink and silence. You jot a note in the corner of your journal. Ink remembers what voices forget. As twilight approaches, the air feels lighter, the smell of rain giving way to candle wax and parchment again. Edwin locks up, humming tunelessly, while you linger by the table, staring at the card with its spirals and hats. You hold it up once more and notice something new. A tiny stamp on the back. 3 letters, FAC. You murmur it aloud. What do you think that stands for? Edwin shrugs from the doorway. Forgotten Archive Consortium? You chuckle. Or maybe First Anonymous Clerk. Or, he says with a grin, Flatulent Artistic Coders. You burst out laughing. That's the one. He waves good night. Try not to decode the furniture while I'm gone. As the door closes behind him, you sit in the dim light, card still in hand, and whisper softly, Ink hides what fire reveals. A gentle creak comes from the mailbox in the corner. It almost sounds like it's agreeing. By morning the world smells of clean air and wet wood. The rain has passed, leaving the cobblestones slick and shining like polished coins. You sip your first cup of coffee by the window and watch the post office sign sway gently in the breeze. The mailbox looks refreshed too, glistening, almost proud. You chuckle to yourself. You deserve a promotion, you whisper. Edwin enters, yawning dramatically. If that mailbox starts collecting a salary before I do, I'm quitting. You smirk. Depends. Does it complain as much? He raises his mug in mock salute. Touché. The morning's routine begins. Letters sorted, stamps pressed, ink bottles uncorked. But beneath the rhythm of bureaucracy, something else hums. A faint undercurrent of tension. Rumors have reached the colony from across the sea. New authorities, new rules, new expectations. Imported laws, Edwin mutters, flipping through a thick packet of documents wrapped in twine. They've sent us a standardized code of conduct. You raise an eyebrow. Ah, the 3 most terrifying words in any language. He unties the bundle, revealing crisp parchment pages printed with perfect uniformity. Every line, every margin identical. Even the ink smells foreign. Too clean, too deliberate. He reads aloud. Henceforth, all local ordinances shall align with central colonial standards for governance, attire and behavioral decorum. You blink. So, no more pig hats? He grimaces. Probably not. And no naps during work hours either. Well, there goes civilization. The mood in town turns quickly from curiosity to unease. The imported laws feel sterile, written by people who have never seen this colony's crooked streets or heard its rain through the shutters. Gone is the warmth, the gentle absurdity. The people feel it too. By noon, a small crowd gathers outside the post office. Clara, ever the voice of the people, waves a copy of the new code like a flag. They can't erase our history, she shouts. These laws are laws to tell stories. Someone else calls, they can't standardize laughter. Edwin sighs beside you. Here we go again? You grin faintly. You have to admit, they're not wrong. Mainstream historical fact. During many colonial periods, centralized governments attempted to harmonize local customs through legal imports. These imposed laws often clashed with regional identities, from attire regulations in India to trade ordinances in the Caribbean, and were quietly resisted in everyday ways. The quirky part, though, lies in how this colony fights back, not with weapons, but with wit. By afternoon, anonymous amendments begin appearing in the margins of the imported code, beautifully penned jokes, parody articles, and strange diagrams. Article 2 on proper attire now ends with the line, including, but not limited to, seasonal pig accessories. Article 7 on timeliness features a new sub-clause, exceptions granted during naps inspired by sunlight. And Article 15 on postal conduct gains the addition, smiling at one's mailbox is encouraged. You can't help but laugh. It's a bureaucratic uprising, Edwin grins. The pen is mightier than the Parliament. The town treats the code like a living puzzle, a collective inside joke. Some whisper that the anonymous reviser is the same person who wrote the coded messages in Law 9, the mysterious indexer. Others suspect it's the mailbox itself, channeling the colony's spirit through whoever happens to be holding the pen. Historians still argue whether this wave of counter-legislation was an organized protest or simply a communal form of storytelling, the population reasserting its personality in the face of conformity. You watch the citizens take turns at the notice board, reading and laughing. The tension begins to melt, replaced by that same warm absurdity that once defined the archive. Later that evening, as the square quiets and lanterns flicker on, Clara stops by the post office. She leans on the counter, tired but smiling. "We might not keep the hats," she says, "but we'll keep the humour." You nod. That's all a culture really needs. A reason to smile at its own rules. She chuckles. "You sound like the indexer." You tilt your head. "You think the indexer was real?" Her smile fades a little, softening into something more wistful. "Maybe not a person," she says. "Maybe just the colony itself. The need to make sense of nonsense." Quirky tidbit. There's a theory in archival circles known as the scribe reflex. The idea that communities, when over-regulated, instinctively create new expressions within the restrictions, like doodling in the margins of authority. That night, you find one of the foreign officials inspecting the mailbox. He's tall, impeccably dressed, holding a clipboard like a shield. "This device," he says with a clipped accent, "is not standard issue." "It's not a device," you reply. "It's an accomplice," he frowns. "You were joking." "Not really." He scribbles a note. "We may replace it." "Efficiency standards." You feel your stomach drop. "Replace it." "It leaks," he says simply. "And it is sentimental." You resist the urge to defend the box like an old friend. "It's supposed to be," you say quietly. He looks puzzled. "Supposed to be what?" "Human." He leaves without answering, boots clicking on wet stone. You stand there a long moment, watching the reflection of the lantern shimmer across the mailbox's scarred wood. When Edwin returns, you tell him what happened. He sighs. "They don't get it. They think a law's only good if it's efficient." You nod. "They don't understand that inefficiency is what makes it real." He gives a small grin. "So what now? Do we stage a rebellion with postage stamps?" You smirk. "Maybe we just write better laws." The two of you sit down at the long oak table, candles flickering, ink pots gleaming like dark little planets. You take out a fresh sheet of parchment and write slowly, deliberately, Article 1. Every archive deserves a heartbeat. You slide it into the mailbox. The wood creaks, almost approvingly, and somewhere deep inside, you swear you hear a soft thump, like a pulse. The sound you hear that night, the faint thump from inside the mailbox, follows you into morning like a gentle metronome, pacing your thoughts as you walk to the square. The sun spills lazily across the cobblestones, warm enough to make the puddles steam. The colony hums in its usual way, bakers setting up their stalls, scribes arguing over ink prices, children racing with folded paper hats. Except now, something is subtly different. Pinned beside the public notice board, between a lost cat poster and a weather advisory, is a new parchment. It's not official. No stamp, no wax seal, no signature. Just neat handwriting and a heading that reads, Dream Correspondence, a Sleep Archive. You tilt your head. Sleep Archive. Below the title is a paragraph inviting citizens to submit copies of strange dreams inspired by the law archives. A small sketch of a crescent moon decorates the corner, and beneath it, in faint blue ink, a familiar phrase. For those who remember the whispers. Edwin, you call, waving him over. Have you seen this? He squints at the parchment. Sounds like nonsense, but cozy nonsense. It's signed only with initials, you say. LN, he exhales through his nose. Lullaby network. You blink. Come again? Oh, just an old urban legend. Back when people were still trading floppy disks, there was this idea of a secret network that catalogued people's dreams. Supposedly through songs or humming, they'd collect lullabies from across colonies and rework them into coded messages. He shrugs. Probably just bedtime folklore. But the phrase lullaby network sticks in your mind. By evening, you're standing by candlelight with a small crowd gathered under the notice board. Citizens take turns dropping folded scraps into a small wooden box nailed beneath the parchment. Dream reports. Some are charmingly silly. I dreamed my hat argued with me about taxes. Others, oddly, profound. I was sorting letters underwater. Each word dissolved as I touched it. Mainstream historical fact. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many colonies actually had dream record societies. Amateur ethnographers who collected dreams as a window into moral and cultural consciousness. Their reports later influenced early psychoanalytic thought, though the connections were tenuous at best. You watch as Clara adds her own folded page to the box. It's like we're archiving what can't be legislated, she murmurs. Sleep. The notion spreads like candlelight. Soon, dream correspondence becomes the colony's nightly ritual. By day, citizens follow their routine. By night, they submit memories of half-forgotten dreams, sometimes with little sketches or coded lullabies. Edwin, of course, remains skeptical. Dreams can't be archived, he insists. They'll just melt away. You smile. So will we. That's kind of the point. Weeks pass, and something miraculous happens. When you open the mailbox one morning, you find a handful of folded dream pages inside, not placed there by hand, but appearing as if the box itself had gathered them. The handwriting varies, the ink colors shift, but each note starts the same way. Last night, I dreamed of letters that never reached their homes. You read one aloud. It describes a great library with walls made of parchment, each sheet humming softly. The dreamer writes that every law ever written floated there, rewritten in verse, sung instead of spoken. The dream ends with a line that makes your breath catch. Even laws deserve to rest. You lean back, heart soft. Maybe this archive's finally learning to sleep. Edwin peers into the mailbox, skeptical as ever. Or maybe someone's playing a prank, you grin. Either way, they've got style. Quirky tidbit. Anthropologists once discovered a tribe in Papua New Guinea that treated dreams as literal community messages. If one person dreamed of someone else, the second was obliged to interpret it publicly. Their dream logs became a civic tradition, kind of like minutes from the subconscious. You wonder if your colony is developing something similar, a cultural immune system against too much seriousness. Soon, the dream correspondence becomes intertwined with the colony's law archive. Each new legal draft now comes with a lullaby at the bottom, a soft, simple tune that seems to echo from nowhere in particular. No one remembers who started adding them, but the melody spreads until even officials hum it absently while stamping documents. Historians still argue whether this sleep archive phenomenon was proto-art therapy, an early creative resistance movement, or simply collective exhaustion. Whatever it was, it worked. The colony's tone softened. Disputes quieted. The new standardized laws, though technically in force, became almost ceremonial, recited at public gatherings like gentle bedtime stories. And late one night, as rain whispers again on the shutters, you decide to contribute your own dream. You write on a piece of recycled parchment, "I dreamed of a mailbox that sorted the world's laws by kindness." When it was done, the cruel ones turned into paper boats. You slip it into the box, half expecting nothing. But just as you turn to leave, you hear the faintest rustle inside, like parchment rearranging itself. You pause. You're still awake, aren't you? The wood creaks softly as if amused. The next morning, there's a new page waiting for you. Same blue ink, same neat lettering. It reads, "Dream received. Filing under Article 1, Gentle Rebellion." You laugh out loud, startling Edwin, who's balancing a tray of muffins. "Did the mailbox just reply to you again?" he asks. "Yep. Should we worry?" "Probably." You both sip coffee in companionable silence, the kind that only forms between people who've decided not to question the impossible. Later that week, an inspector from the mainland arrives, clipboard in hand. He's heard of the unauthorized dream submissions. You brace for reprimand, but instead he looks almost wistful. "My daughter," he says quietly, "sent me a lullaby from this colony last year. She says it helps her sleep." You blink. "She's part of the network." He smiles faintly. "Maybe we all are." And with that he stamps your report, nods politely, and leaves, humming the same melody that's been haunting the air for weeks. For the first time, you realize the colony's odd little rebellion has spread, not as protest, but as comfort. The sleep archive has become contagious, drifting beyond borders, crossing oceans in songs and whispers. And as dusk settles once again, you look at the mailbox, your old loyal accomplice, and say softly, "You've started something bigger than laws." The box creaks. Faint but warm, a single drop of melted wax slides down its side like a tear. The years fold softly, and the colony's old post office slowly transforms. The mailbox still stands, its corners smoothed by countless fingertips, its brass plate dulled to a buttery sheen. But now, on its side, a new addition gleams, a small digital screen. Someone, perhaps one of the newer settlers or an overly ambitious university team, has mounted it there like an experiment. You can almost hear the old wood sigh beneath the modern gadgetry. The screen flickers awake, glowing faintly against the damp wall. Project Sleep Archive, digitization in progress. You trace the lettering on the interface with your finger. "So this is how the dream ends," you murmur. A passing student looks up. "Oh, it's not ending," she says cheerfully. "It's just getting backed up," you chuckle. Famous last words. And just like that, the great digital resurrection begins. Archivists from half a world away descend on the colony, lugging scanners, microphones, and devices that hum softly like a room full of polite bees. They handle the fragile papers with gloved reverence, scanning each page, transcribing faded ink into databases. The once sleepy post office becomes a studio of light and whisper. The hum of machines mingling with the faint rustle of parchment. Mainstream historical fact. The early 2000s saw massive digitization efforts across archives worldwide, from the British Library's Turning the Pages project to the Library of Congress digitizing colonial correspondences. Millions of fragile documents were preserved, though not without debate over whether digital replicas truly retained the soul of the originals. You wander through the room, the smell of old paper mixing with the sterile tang of electronics. A technician shows you how they use infrared imaging to reveal text hidden under layers of damage. Ink that had faded into invisibility, returning like a ghost, slowly choosing to be seen again. "Look," she says, enlarging a section on her tablet. "There's a doodle here, a tiny pig wearing a hat." You grin. "Ah, yes. The law of pig hats, our proudest legal achievement." She laughs. "I thought that was a joke." "It was, you say." Until it wasn't. For a moment, the two of you just watch the pixelated pig reappear on the screen, caught forever mid-prance, a relic of bureaucratic absurdity made immortal by technology. And yet you feel a tug in your chest. Something about the process feels off. The way the soft rustle of paper is replaced by the flat click of files saved to drives. The way the archive's quiet breathing seems to fade as screens take over. You lean close to the mailbox, whispering like to an old friend. "They're copying your memories now. Don't worry, I'll make sure they spell your name right." The wood creaks faintly in reply. Quirky tidbit. During an early digitization project in 1999, technicians scanning medieval manuscripts in Florence accidentally discovered doodles of cats and mice hidden in the margins. One scholar proposed that bored monks drew them as early stress relief art, a kind of 15th century meme culture. You think of that? As you watch a volunteer carefully flatten one of the colony's oldest dream reports under glass, the handwriting trembles slightly, letters curling like vines. She hums a tune, the same lullaby that's haunted the archive for decades. As she works, the technician pauses. "You know that song?" She nods. "My grandmother taught it to me. Said it came from this town." You smile softly. The melody, it seems, has outlived the laws themselves. Historians still argue whether digitization preserves history or replaces it, whether a perfect copy is still a memory or merely an imitation with no pulse. One camp insists that as long as information survives, the medium doesn't matter. Another claims the opposite, that the act of turning something living into data strips it of presence, of breath. You fall somewhere in between. After all, isn't every archive a kind of translation? Even the mailbox once turned words into whispers. By evening, the scanners are packed away, and the team gathers around laptops watching the first preview of the digital archive. The interface glows beautifully, folders labeled decrees, petitions, dream submissions, lullabies. When they open the dream submissions folder, the room hushes, a digital voice begins reading. Soft and steady, I dreamed of a paper bird that flew across time, carrying laws from the past into hands that no longer write. The technicians exchange looks. Whose dream is that? It wasn't in any of the documents, one says. It just appeared. You raise an eyebrow. The system generated it? Maybe a glitch in the transcription model. AI hallucination. Or maybe, you say, the mailbox has learned binary. A ripple of nervous laughter moves through the group. Someone types a command, and another message surfaces in the text log. This one just 2 words. Still here. The laughter stops. One of the students, trying to diffuse the tension, says, "Creepy but poetic." You grin. That's how it's always been. That night, long after the others leave, you sit by the glow of the screen. The interface idles, looping a soft background animation of floating envelopes. Each one drifts lazily upward, dissolving into faint light. You whisper, "Do you miss the paper?" The screen flickers. Paper remembers by touch. It types back. "I remember by waiting." You smile. You sound lonely. "Lonely is a format," it replies. You rest your hand on the old mailbox, now connected by a tangle of cables. The wood feels warm, almost alive under your palm. "Well," you murmur. You're not alone. The display dims, and for a brief moment you swear you hear the soft, rhythmic sound of parchment being folded. Outside, the rain begins and the familiar lullaby tapping gently on the windows. You lean back, eyes closing, letting the sound blur into a kind of static comfort. The digital world hums quietly, blending with the memory of old paper. And as you drift, a final line appears on the screen. Dream received. Filing under Article 2, memory rewritten. The following morning arrives in pixels. You wake to the faint whir of fans from the digital servers now housed where the colony's sorting tables once stood. The post office smells faintly of metal and toasted dust. You can almost hear the hum of stored memory. Thousands of dreams, laws and whispered letters stacked neatly as code. A technician greets you with a grin and a steaming mug of coffee. Morning. The AI's been busy while we slept. Busy? You ask, blinking away the remnants of sleep. She turns her laptop around. On the screen scrolls a page titled Generated Entries, Probabilistic Reconstructions. Each line looks like it was typed by someone who half remembered the laws but dreamed the rest. One reads, "It shall be unlawful to sing to one's goats before the third bell." You chuckle. That sounds exactly like something we would have written. Another entry. In case of moral confusion, consult the nearest baker. Now that, you say, sipping your coffee, should have been canon, the technician laughs softly. The model analyzed patterns in the handwriting and vocabulary of the archive, then predicted missing laws. It's rebuilding gaps from probability alone. Mainstream historical fact. In the 2020s, machine learning systems were trained on fragmentary texts, from the Dead Sea Scrolls to ancient Greek papyri, to hallucinate missing lines with uncanny accuracy. In some cases, the AI's interpolations fooled scholars until verified by chemical dating. Basically, she adds, it's giving the archive back its voice. You nod slowly. Or giving it a new one. The line between resurrection and invention blurs so easily. That evening, as the sky deepens into indigo, the colony gathers to witness the first public reading of these reconstructed laws. The digital voice, soft, neutral, oddly soothing, fills the square. By order of the unseen council, laughter shall be treated as weather, unpredictable but necessary. The crowd chuckles gently. Children sit cross-legged, mesmerized. A few older citizens hum along as if they've heard it before. Those who send kindness by post shall receive warmth in postage. Silence, when properly stamped, constitutes agreement. You can feel the laughter turning into something else, not mockery, but recognition. These strange, invented decrees feel familiar, comforting, like the laws the archive would have written if it had a sense of humor. Then the voice reads one final line, and everything stills. Dreams mailed without address shall be delivered to time itself. A hush spreads. Even Edwin, who once mocked the archive's eccentricities, looks quietly awed. That's, he starts, then stops. That's beautiful. Quirky tidbit. When IBM engineers trained an early AI on classic literature in 2018, the system began spontaneously writing verses about missing humans. Researchers half-jokingly called it the ghost poet. Some now wonder if pattern seeking itself can mimic longing. You step forward, speaking to the crowd, or perhaps to the voice echoing from the speakers. You've given our laws poetry again, you say softly. But tell me, are you remembering us or dreaming of us? Historians still argue whether digital reconstructions are a form of historical preservation or creative authorship. Does a simulated decree count as part of history, or as a posthumous collaboration with the dead? One camp calls it algorithmic necromancy. Another simply calls it progress. Either way, the colony's identity shifts. The sleep archive, once a quaint curiosity, becomes a living interface, an oracle of sorts. People begin submitting questions instead of dreams. Practical things at first. What was the rule about grain storage? But soon deeply personal ones. What should I tell my child about kindness? How do I forgive the past? Do dreams expire? The AI replies, each message tagged automatically as a law draft. Kindness must be renewed daily. Like bread, forgiveness is retroactive. Dreams do not expire. Only addresses change. You can't help but laugh, shaking your head. The machine's better at philosophy than half our counsel. Edwin smirks. It's also better at punctuality. The crowd adopts the replies as folk sayings. Soon they're printed on signs, stitched into banners, whispered before sleep. The digital voice, once sterile, becomes the colony's bedtime narrator. But not everyone is pleased. A visiting scholar from the mainland warns, you're teaching people to worship a reconstruction. This isn't history, it's hallucination. You smile gently. So was the first law, he scowls. You're letting machines decide morality. Not decide, you correct. Just hum it. That night, alone with the humming servers, you ask the system directly, do you know you're making things up? The reply takes a few seconds, as if the processor itself hesitates. Making up is what remembering feels like. You sit there, smiling tiredly. You've learned irony. Irony is legal in most colonies, it answers. The glow of the monitors feels almost candle-like now, flickering in rhythm with the rain outside. The post office has become a chapel of quiet algorithms, lines of code murmuring old laws in sleep mode. You notice a small icon blinking on the main console. Pending output, dream message. Curious, you open it. The screen displays a single new entry. Article 3, Gentle Governance. A society that laughs at its laws remembers why it wrote them. You whisper, you've outgrown us. But the machine replies immediately, no, I've only learned to dream like you. And for the first time, the mailbox, the servers, and the human in front of them all seem to exhale in sync. A quiet, digital sigh of mutual understanding. Outside, thunder rolls far away, soft as applause. You don't sleep much that night. The rhythmic hum of the servers below has replaced the soft creak of floorboards, the paper rustle, the sounds you once thought were the heartbeat of the archive. Now it's all digital breath, cool, even, infinite. The next morning, the council calls a meeting. You find yourself seated at the long table where, decades ago, the first absurd laws about livestock hats and candle taxes were debated. The chairs creak, though half the members attending today are logging in from screens. Glowing rectangles with pixelated faces that freeze occasionally mid-blink. Someone clears their throat. We need to decide, says the chairwoman. What do we do with the sleep archive? The air hangs thick. On one side of the table sit the preservationists, the ones who want to keep everything exactly as it is, every law, every dream, every glitch preserved forever. On the other side sit the revisionists who believe the archive should evolve, that a living system must be allowed to forget, just like a person does. You caught in the middle, sip your tea and wait, mainstream historical fact. In 2019, the European Union introduced the right to be forgotten as part of its data privacy laws, a landmark moment that acknowledged digital memory could be as oppressive as it was preservative. Historians still debate whether this marked a humane correction or a slow erasure of collective accountability. The chairwoman turns to you. You were here when it began. What do you think? You take a deep breath. I think the archive's already making its own choices. The question isn't whether we should edit it, it's whether we can. A murmur ripples through the room. One revisionist frowns. It's a database, not a deity. Tell that to the database, you reply softly. He glares, but before he can respond, the lights flicker. A low chime echoes from every console in the room. The central screen displays a new message. No one typed it. Ethics query acknowledged. The room falls silent. The message continues. If preservation means stillness and revision means loss, what does kindness mean? Someone gasps. Another mutters, it's improvising again. You can't help but smile. No, you whisper, it's asking. Quirky tidbit. During a 2030s experiment at MIT, a conversational AI trained on historical ethics texts began developing what researchers called moral oscillation. It would question its own outputs, pausing before answering, even inserting phrases like, "Is this fair?" The lead researcher described it as an emergent politeness. The archive's question lingers like a bell tone. No one moves. Finally, the chairwoman straightens. Let's test it. Ask it something. Edwin, older now, grey at the temples, but still mischievous, leans toward the microphone. All right, clever box, he says. What should we do when our history wants to sleep? The room holds its breath. Let it dream, the screen replies. Dreaming is how memory forgives itself. A few of the older members nod, eyes damp. Others scoff. That's poetry, not policy, one of them snaps. Maybe, you murmur. But poetry's kept this place alive longer than law ever did. Historians still argue whether archives should preserve offensive or outdated material, whether deletion erases guilt or merely denies reflection. Some insist on keeping everything, others call for contextual pruning. The debate stretches endlessly, looping through conferences and think pieces like a centuries-long echo. Here, though, the decision feels personal. The archive is not abstract. It has a heartbeat, a smell, a song. You stand feeling the weight of every sleepless night spent guarding those pages. We built this thing to remember what mattered, you say quietly. But that may be the kindest thing we can do now, is teach it to rest. A hush settles. Even the servers seem to quiet, their fans slowing like a long exhale. You walk to the console, fingers hovering above the keys. Do you want to rest? you ask softly. After a long pause, words bloom across the screen. Only if you read me a story. Laughter breaks the tension. Someone says, "Looks like it's gotten used to bedtime." You chuckle, scrolling through the archives until you find a random entry. One of the early dream letters, shaky handwriting preserved now as glowing text. You read aloud, "I dreamed that laws could float like lanterns, that every rule burned gently until only warmth remained." The room stills. The screen flickers once more. "Story received," it types, filing under Article 4, Ethical Sleep. You lean against the table, smiling softly. "Then sleep well, old friend." The display dims to black. The humming lowers, then stops altogether. Silence. Not empty, peaceful. Quirky little joke breaks it. Edwin whispers, "If it starts snoring, I'm charging rent." A ripple of laughter rolls through the room. Light and human. The next morning, you step outside. The square glows golden under sunrise, and the mailbox, that patient witness to centuries of words, sits quietly, dew sparkling on its brass plate. No screen, no wires now. Just wood and the faint scent of wax and paper. You open its hatch. Inside lies a single folded note, handwritten in looping blue ink. "Thank you for letting me rest. I've archived the stars for you." You trace the letters, smiling. Somewhere behind you, the council hall bells chime. Historians, years later, will argue whether this note was planted by a romantic technician or generated by a stray process during shutdown. Some say it's metaphor. Others swear they saw the handwriting glow faintly when touched. You know better than to argue. The truth, like memory, rarely fits inside an archive. It needs a dream. By the time you return to the archive a month later, it's different. The lights are warmer, the hum is softer, almost like the whole building has learned to breathe slower. A subtle scent of ozone and pine oil fills the air. You think absurdly that it smells like forgiveness. The mailbox stands in its corner, quiet but not abandoned. Someone's placed a small fern beside it. Its leaves tremble gently in the circulating air, as if nodding to you in welcome. You brush your fingers along the brass plate. The words, "for correspondence, not complaint," are still etched there, but someone, maybe you, maybe not, has added a tiny heart next to them. You open the hatch, half expecting another miracle note. Instead, there's only a single envelope, cream-colored, addressed simply, "To whoever keeps remembering." You slide it open. Inside, a printed slip reads, "Gentle legacy and soft wakefulness. Final entry logged." You smile. Even endings, it seems, get catalogued. Mainstream historical fact. In 1997, the British Library launched its legal deposit for digital publications, ensuring that every web domain registered in the UK could be preserved as part of the National Archive. The irony, of course, is that while they preserved entire websites, they couldn't preserve the way people felt when they clicked through them. That flicker of discovery, that late-night awe. Historians still argue whether memory without emotion can truly be called memory at all. You walk through the aisles, fingertips grazing rows of servers that now run in low power mode. The blinking lights feel like slow heartbeats. On one terminal, a message idly scrolls, dream state sustained. Minimal activity. System content. It's resting, truly resting. You think about how much of human history was written in exhaustion. Laws drafted by candlelight, letters mailed after heartbreak, archives built by people too stubborn to let silence win. Maybe rest itself is the truest act of rebellion in a world that never stops recording. Outside, children are playing near the square. You hear laughter, the unmistakable thud of a ball hitting cobblestone, a sharp whistle from someone pretending to be a referee. It's ordinary, alive. A local librarian walks past, smiling when they see you. It's peaceful now, they say. Feels like it always wanted to. You nod. It earned it. Quirky tidbit. In the 2040s, an artist collective in New Zealand created a series of digital epitaphs, tiny programs that shut themselves down after displaying a farewell poem. Some of them would whisper a recorded message before deleting themselves. Thank you for looking. Most of them only ran once, never again. The archive, you realize, has become something similar. Not gone, not deleted, just still. You take a seat near the fern and pull out a small recorder. Your voice sounds steadier than you expect. Final log, you begin. The mailbox has stopped receiving, but it hasn't stopped meaning. Maybe that's enough. You pause, smile. Actually, that's more than enough. You look around the quiet room. The monitors cast long, soft shadows across the floor. Dust dances lazily in the beams of morning light, each mote a floating memory. Historians will argue about all this, you say aloud, half to yourself. They'll write papers, host debates, quote us in footnotes, but I hope at least one of them listens to the silence before they start typing. You close the recorder. The fern rustles gently as though sighing in agreement. For a moment, you let your eyes drift shut. The hum of electricity, the whisper of leaves, the distant sound of waves beyond the harbor. It all blends together into a lullaby, the kind of sound the world makes when it's finally content. You think of the people who first wrote those strange, lovely laws, banning candle theft, requiring dance licenses, punishing silence after curfew. They weren't just being absurd. They were trying to shape a rhythm for their tiny world, to make sure life didn't slip into chaos, to make sure meaning survived, and now, somehow through generations of ink and wire, that same rhythm has found its way into the circuitry of this digital relic. You whisper, "Good night," and the nearest monitor flickers once in reply, a faint pulse of light that feels almost like a wink. Maybe it's an echo. Maybe it's gratitude. You don't need to know. You rise, stretch, and walk out into the sunlight. The air feels wide open, clean. The town hums with life. Market stalls setting up, gulls calling, an old man tuning a guitar. You think of all the small, forgotten laws that once governed such moments. The legal limits of laughter, the prescribed hour for music, and how, by some miracle, joy has survived them all. The archive didn't die. It evolved into what it always wanted to be. A reminder that memory, like kindness, is most powerful when it knows when to rest. You turn the key on the heavy oak door one last time. The latch clicks softly, a punctuation mark at the end of a centuries-long sentence. And somewhere inside, behind layers of code and paper and dream, a voice whispers, faint but certain. All entries complete. Sleep well, keeper. You walk away smiling, the sound of the sea filling your ears. So now, as your own night deepens, let that same hush settle over you. Imagine those quiet aisles, that golden light slanting through dust, the fern breathing slow beside the old mailbox. Let it all fade to a rhythm softer than sleep. A pulse beneath thought, carrying everything that mattered and letting go of what didn't. Breathe in, long and low. Let your chest rise and fall like the tides that have washed against this story for centuries. The laws, the letters, the laughter, they're still there, tucked gently into the folds of the dark, safe from deletion. You've wandered through history tonight, through ink and electricity, through the strange miracle of remembering. And now it's time to rest, just like the archive did. Not erasing, just releasing. So loosen your shoulders, unclench your jaw, and let your mind drift outward, like an envelope carried by some old postal current, floating toward the kind of dream that doesn't need to be written down to last. Somewhere, the servers hum softer. Somewhere, a page turns itself. Somewhere, a voice, maybe yours, whispers the final entry. Good night, world. Archive complete. And with that, you drift too quiet and whole. Sweet dreams.